Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. We both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's good. We have tons to cover this week, but as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is HBAR has been listed on the largest exchange in Brazil, that's Mercado. So anybody who now has the ability to get exposure to HBAR that didn't have that before, certainly welcome. And Zep, the next thing I want to get into, we talk about this a fair amount. I'm not sure what's going to have a bigger impact on the Hedera network. Is it going to be enterprises? We certainly have a lot of traction there. We have a lot of focus on enterprises. Or is it going to be some of the smaller businesses that are more nimble and can do some interesting stuff in the space? And I want to talk about a couple of those right now. The first one is going to be Dropp. Now, Dropp, we know, already had an integration with WordPress, but that was mainly for gratuity, for tips, which I do think is a great use case, but it's not as exciting, at least in my opinion, compared to what they just announced. And that's a new plugin for WordPress that essentially allows content creators to put their content behind a paywall. And this is what's really going to have the potential to disrupt the ad-based model that, of course, has taken over the internet, or even the subscription-based model. Zep, do you have any thoughts on what has come out around Dropp?
Like you said, they're more of a fast-moving, sort of nimble startup. And because of that, they can innovate quicker and at least roll out those innovations quicker. A lot of the focus has been on enterprise, but these enterprises can't move as quickly, and they're sort of going to be perhaps updating legacy systems. But when you look at a team like Dropp, who's been in our ecosystem now for what, sort of four years or so, maybe even longer, they are coming for the big dogs. Of course they got showcased by FedNow, but they've also got this Dropp, WordPress integration and then the Shopify integration. And I think it's sort of the way it's going to look is you're going to have these startups like Dropp that come out with these innovations, show that they can be used at scale, show they can sort of be used by plug and play, by legacy, like WordPress, like Shopify, and then those sort of fast-moving companies will then maybe even be bought out by some larger ones, like a Google acquisition or something like that. But I think that's what we're going to see throughout this ecosystem is the smaller devs, the smaller developer teams pioneering because they can be more nimble, and then that technology gets updated and integrated by the bigger players as we move forwards.
And of course, I've already reached out to Sushil to see if we can get some more insight into exactly what they're doing. The next team I want to touch on came from a tweet, and it was from a longtime community member, Tom Johnson. He said, I'm wondering if Neuron might have something to do with the CAA working with Amazon, looking to launch drone deliveries in the UK beyond line of sight. And he comments, from my new friends across the pond. And Neuron did respond to this. They said, we have had discussions with the Amazon team and hope to be able to secure them as a partner in the future. Their move to the UK is probably related to some of the developments in the airspace rules, and Neuron are working with the CAA to be the first to exploit this. So Zeb, what really strikes me about this is when Neuron talked at Hello Future Live, you could really tell they are in pole position with your regulators there in the UK. I actually think there's no close second. So I think they're exactly right when they say that the reason why Amazon is interested is because you do have a forward-looking regulator in the UK that's going to invite this kind of innovation into the space. But of course, this is in your backyard. So what are your thoughts?
I met the team, or rather heard the team speak at the Abrdn DLA Piper meetup, sort of 3 or 4 months ago now. And I was seriously impressed by their vision. And I was really impressed by their commitment to Hedera as well. And their commitment there by saying, sort of things like the Hedera consensus services really is one of the only services existing on a public network to enable a use case like this at scale. So I really think not only do we have a team pioneering what is an essential piece of infrastructure for a world which is going to inevitably have far more drones in it, but they've also got that vision inherently tied to the Hedera network. So excited to see what they come up with there, and another fast-moving team in our ecosystem.
And Neuron's starting off with this aviation use case, but they want to get into all kinds of Internet of Things, ride sharing. They want to go across the board. So they're doing a great job. The next thing we want to get into is shark bites. We had a whole long list of questions that we got through this week. Now we've drained down the tank a little bit, so make sure that you put your questions down in the comments for Rob. But in the meantime, listen in. Rob, welcome back. How was your week?
Hey, Brandon. Yes, it's great. I'm back in Australia after a few amazing weeks with the team in Switzerland, in Zurich, and yeah, back and still powering through. Lots to do.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to jump right into it because we have a fair amount of questions here today. So it's going to be a little bit rapid fire, but we'll jump right into it.
Okay.
To start, I want to discuss something that was noticed by the community, the inclusion of HBAR into the Hong Kong Virtual Asset Consortium. Can you tell us how that came to be and the importance for the Hedera ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really interesting development, and actually, I think it demonstrates the relentless moving up the charts and the tables that Hedera is getting in terms of both adoption and wider recognition. So the HKVAC is the Hong Kong Virtual Assets Consortium. They have been set up really to provide indexes and kind of dashboarding and investor support in terms of virtual assets. So we had previously not been on those indexes. And now that one of those indexes, which is the Global Cryptocurrency Large Market Cap Index, has thrown out a couple of the previous cryptos that were in that index basket and included Hedera. So, it may not seem like a big thing, but actually it is. There's a basket of 30 currencies. We're now, we've got that level of recognition. It's a bit like being, HBAR being listed in Japan. The very, very few cryptos kind of get the official seal of approval, and it's like getting the official seal of approval in Hong Kong. So it's a big milestone for the Asia Pacific kind of focus that we're now building. It's quite a big deal. Actually, the Hashgraph Association APAC team was entirely behind us. So using relationships, using relentless pressure, and just highlighting the amazing things that the Hedera ecosystem is doing in terms of utility and bringing these big enterprise projects in addition to all the other things that the community is doing as well. It's just it can't be ignored. And so all of these little milestones just add to the fact that Hedera is inching forward and positioning itself for the next bull run. So for that reason alone, it's a really good development.
That's it. Slow and steady. It's a good milestone. All right. So the next one is from MHPD Law Dog. He noticed a headline stating that Microsoft is partnering with Flutterwave to advance digital payments in Africa. Is this related to the same Hedera use case we discussed last week? And do you have any additional insights on Microsoft's involvement?
In short, no, unfortunately. No, it's not related to our project. So Flutterwave have been working with Microsoft and Microsoft Azure as their cloud platform, and this is a strategic collaboration that has kind of been re-established for the next 5 years. So that was an announcement a couple of months ago. What is interesting, though, in that press release, and I spoke to the team a little about this, they're including OpenAI or access to OpenAI as part of that initiative, with an eye to supporting business development, supporting their merchants in Africa. And so I'm sure we'll very soon get into a conversation about how one does data integrity with AI tooling. So, I think that's an amazing use case for HCS, but I've not had the opportunity to talk about that to the team yet. First things first, let's get this massive program underway and running, and then we can look at all the other use cases, of which there are many, for Flutterwave and, dominating payments in Africa.
Fair enough. All right, so replying to a post I made discussing the string of positive developments in the Hedera ecosystem, Tom Bega said, all the enterprise use cases are silos. That's fine, but they aren't part of the interconnected ecosystem on Hedera. Hashpack, SaucerSwap, SentX, HeadStarter, and Hashport, these are the Hedera ecosystem. They are core infrastructure, also with Archaea and others. I'd love to see enterprise get themselves connected to the Hedera ecosystem, but until they do, let's not mislead people into thinking they are. So what are your thoughts on this one, Rob?
Yeah, Tom wrote quite a long thread on X, and it was interesting. It's definitely worth reading. But I think some of it isn't actually a reflection of facts. It's an interesting perspective. And in this particular part of that thread, it fails to recognize that everything is interconnected, right? So many of the enterprise use cases are, just toes in the water or baby steps towards Web 3, so Web 2.5 that we say. And from a particular perspective, could be seen as silos, of course, right? They're incumbent businesses that are just, developing their Web3 tooling. They're, utilizing HCS. They're kind of dipping their toes in the water for HTS. But to say it's not connected to the ecosystem, I don't think is true. We've got this amazing Web3 ecosystem forming, and Tom, lists some of them. There are many more, of course. We've got wallets and bridges and dexes and marketplaces. We're building an Oracle now, which we've announced with WorldPay. So we've got all that kind of Web3 native infrastructure kind of forming and interacting. But the enterprise use cases aren't silos. I mean, they are using at the base layer Hedera consensus service, right? So that's a base layer to everything, right? So that by definition is connected. Use of Hedera token service, as some of them are starting to do. I mean, LG with their NFT marketplace is tokenized. Any of the governing council members that are using Guardian, Guardians are tokens, right? So the tokens enable interoperability. We've got Miko wallets supporting the Guardian token service. So that's another link. This is a great opportunity, really, to kind of list all the governing council use cases, which are kind of growing by the day. And I see the pipeline with the Hashgraph Association enterprise program. So more will be added, in rapid succession. So we've got ServiceNow, right? So ServiceNow, very active, very involved, very vocal. Started using HCS, then the token service, and Guardian integration. So all of the things that comes with Guardian are now interconnected with all of the things that ServiceNow is doing, right? Avery Dennison, of course, driving 1,1600 transactions a second, mostly HCS, to be fair, but moving into the token service. Once you've got a token service in place, you need a wallet. That's either a custody provider or a Web3 wallet. So that's an interconnection, right? Anything that's tokenized is by definition, in Web3, a property right? So a property right, I can do whatever I like with it. So I can put it into a marketplace, I can send it to someone, I can put it to an exchange. So these connections are forming, these layers of value are forming. So we've got DLA Piper, Toko, security token platform, but they emit their tokens onto Hedera. So another token use case. And of course, they've now got their license in the Middle East, their VARA license in Dubai. So that's a regulatory seal of approval for all of those use cases. Our security token portfolio is growing rapidly, as I think we've seen recently. Abrdn, again, regulated governing council member, which is issuing tokens and tokenized funds. LG I've mentioned. WorldPay, we've just announced the proof of reserve project with pushing USDC. So we've got a stable coin on Hedera with an Oracle, which is not just for WorldPay, it will be part of the community. And that Oracle is actually based on the architecture of Hashport. And Hashport is our bridge. And that's operated by BCW, who also have the Hashgraph naming service, and Archaea, which Tom also mentions. So all of these things, you only need to dig a little deeper than just the perception of these silos to understand that they are all interconnected and interrelated. Hyundai is another one. Flutterwave we've mentioned. And Shinhan and Standard Bank, two governing council banking members, running their stablecoin pilot project, which is being leveraged as part of the stablecoin studio, which has a multitude of banks and users kind of now beating a path to our door. So I understand Tom's perspective. I don't agree with it because you only have to dig a little deeper to see this fungal web of interconnectivity, which is pretty amazing. And then the retail end of things start plugging into all of that as well. So dig a bit deeper and you'll find the truth.
And those connections just grow over time and get more intricate and so forth.
Absolutely, it's layers of value, layers and
Yeah.
layers. It's network effect, right? And the network effect is now forming, and it'll be resilient and strong and foundational as we go into the next bull run.
And I welcome the criticism from
Of course.
Tom. I enjoyed that thread that he put
Yeah,
out.
it was
I
great.
read every little bit of it. Some of them I strongly disagreed with, and some of it I agreed with. I know he had a few suggestions in there, but one of his suggestions was to have a venture arm. Hedera should have a venture arm, and that's actually already been established with the Swiss Hashgraph Association, the HBAR Foundation, and to a lesser extent the DLT Science Foundation. So he has some great suggestions, but a lot of that stuff is already happening, right?
Well, it is. I can't talk to the foundation's ventures plan, but certainly the association is. We've out of the innovation program, we're establishing a venture studio and a partnered venture fund, which is going to be fed by feeder funds globally. Right. So this is part of the recognition that we've always had actually in the association that we can't be reliant on HBAR funding from the Treasury, forever, right? So net, fresh money, net new investment, an investment thesis, and a portfolio of businesses that we're ideally placed to support is part of that ventures kind of mindset. So it's less of a kind of grant giving mindset and more of a ventures mindset. And I think that's both the evolution and the maturation of this space.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Next up, we have Dude Mantu, who asked, how important is not having a mempool and MEV issues for financial firms looking at DLT solutions? Some of the new DLTs claim faster execution, like Aptos and Sui. Is there a threshold time that's acceptable to fintech firms? Also, would not having MEV issues mitigate a slower execution time? Now, I know two things that pop into my head right away. I know that 15 seconds, under 15 seconds is considered real time. And I know credit cards focus on trying to execute under 7 seconds, both of which were well under. But what are your thoughts, Rob?
This got a bit technical, a bit quickly, which is fine. But luckily, last week in Zurich, I had the chance to catch up with our good friend Greg Scallard, who'd come up from his base in France for a couple of days. So I asked him this question so that I didn't butcher it. And what he said was that MEV, minor extractable value, is the ability, I'm going to read this out, so apologies, is the ability for a node actor to monitor the mempool and inject a transaction to profit from transactions that are yet to be executed. So what that means is users, bad actors can potentially front run because they can inject transactions into blocks, and the block creators, or the leaders for that network, can then determine how best to place those transactions and maybe get an edge on the market. This is front running. In traditional finance, this is front running, and it's obviously a bad thing. So if I'm a node and I get to pick which transactions to include in a block, I can spot one that can move the price of an asset and inject my transaction to purchase at a lower price before the one that will move the price, and then inject another one to sell, right? So that's how you front run. Or I can monitor transactions in the mempool as an external actor and inject my transaction into the pool with a higher transaction fee to try and get ahead of the other one, given that the node creating a block will favor transactions that have a higher value to the node, i.e. a higher fee or a tip. But with Hedera, there's no leader. Right? So there's no node crafting of blocks, so they're not able to front run. They could technically insert a transaction ahead of the one that they receive. But if the user sending the transaction submitted it to two or more nodes, by the time the malicious node had inspected the transaction, created its own and injected it into the network, the duplicate sent to another node will be further ahead in terms of consensus and likely get there first. So it's actually not possible on Hedera. I mean, technically it could be, but in reality it is unlikely to happen. So going back to the question about large financial institutions or banks, whether this is important to them, yes, absolutely. I mean, they spend millions and millions of dollars all the time minimizing the time it takes to get their trade to reach Wall Street. Famously, JP Morgan and Goldman sit right next to the Wall Street exchanges that they use, literally to minimize the cabling between them to give them an edge. So they care deeply about being first to these trades. MEV, in our opinion, is actually a deal breaker. And so as the regulated financial institutions of the world become more and more aware of Hedera and realize that there is an option that isn't blockchain and it isn't kind of related to the issues around mempools and MEV, then there will only be one choice. That's Hedera.
Fair enough. And I think in the future we can dig further into Aptos, Sui, and other competitors, figuring out once they actually get to scale and doing it in the real world, what their time to finality looks like, and also what are the trade-offs to get that finality down so low. So interesting.
Well, and it's always a trade-off, isn't it? We know that any blockchain, any chain of blocks, when it scales, has to trade off, right? It's just physics. And so those trade-offs are usually down to decentralization, which is trust, centralization of the network, and security. So those are both things that are really important. Trust and security, are red lines for regulated organizations. So they would not trade off on those things, which is why we're seeing, or we have seen, in the past, banks going to private networks, private permissioned variants of blockchains in order to get that speed and scale. But they have, of course, added security issues by making it a private network, because you don't use consensus in the same way as a public network does.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we've gotten some good questions from this next person. Eric DM101 asks, could Rob give his thoughts on which type of use case he thinks will be responsible for sharding to go live? And will it be banking, governmental, or enterprise application? Also, what's the earliest he sees this happening? This is an interesting question. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Is it going to be the throughput that's happening on Hedera kind of pushing Hedera to start to shard? Or are we going to shard before it's really necessary because of the transaction volume that's on Hedera, and eventually we fill up that throughput that's provided from these interconnected shards that will eventually make up the Hedera network? But what are your thoughts, Rob?
It's basically down to throughput, right? So it's the TPS that is going to drive this, and there is a number, and I don't know what it is at the moment, but the Swells Labs engineering team have a number somewhere between 10,000 transactions a second and 100,000 transactions a second, where it becomes important to move towards sharding. I used to think that we would have shards for other reasons. I thought there might be shards for privacy layers or sidechains, special purpose networks like that supported IoT, for example, that had different reasons for existing and maybe different properties required. However, Lehman assures me that actually compromises security. So when we talk about sharding, it's specifically about this thing. Sidechains and layer 2s and privacy layers and IoT networks are still possible, but not as part of kind of a sharding agenda. And sharding requires state proofs, and state proofs haven't been delivered yet because we've got time. There's no true urgency. We've got the throttle at 10,000, which we're kind of quite regularly seeing spikes going through now. There is some time. In terms of use cases, it's going to be the high throughput ones. We will probably certainly see Atma scaling up. I mean, it seems to be a relentless increase in their TPS. But we can't rely on one user, of course. And there are a number of other really key high throughput use cases that are emerging now. We've got micropayments, Dropp being an example of that, and working on a few others. We've got Flutterwave, big remittance payments. We're seeking to drive more adoption of USDC and creating more liquidity. So that's all transactions. As we come into the next bull run, we'll see a lot more consumer engagement type applications. The kind of rewards, the NFT marketplaces, and so I can't say which of those use cases is going to drive that scale requirement, but they will start all clicking in, and we'll hit a parabolic curve, I'm sure, on that. So we've got to get ahead of that. And the tech committee, the Governing Council Tech Committee, is charged with discussing things like that and determining where on the roadmap they should be. So state proofs are really interesting. I had a chat with Greg about this last week, and we know what to do. We've got most of the design and code in place for that, but it's going to have to be a really thorough delivery process because it's fundamental to a lot of things. In fact, all of those different network interconnectivity is likely to be based on state proofs. And a state proof is a kind of data packet, if you like, which determines within a short time window, like now, within a kind of 3-minute time window, it compresses the address book. It compresses everything back to the Genesis block, actually, so that one has a proof of a transaction or an account or a balance or any number of things at that point in time. And so that can be used for anchoring shards and enabling other things that need to be done, such as balancing of node staking and across the network to secure the consensus for the network as a whole. So there's quite a lot to be done, and one wouldn't want to rush that. It's definitely on the radar of the core engineering team, and it will be delivered in due course. I would like to say it will be within the next year or so, because I truly think that we'll be seeing that sort of throughput in that time frame.
Well, that's good to hear. So the tech has to keep up. All right. The next one, you mentioned consumer engagement. So that's retail facing. This one talks about some of that kind of stuff. So Red Dragon Vet 2950 had more of a statement than a question, but I thought we might address it anyway. He said, "Hey guys, I just wanted to say thank you for the updates. The only concern I have with Hashpack is the inability to off-ramp to US fiat other than transferring to an exchange or utilizing an EVM. This bull run is about adoption and ease of use. Hedera's focus is enterprise adoption, but I think they've forgotten enterprise chases retail adoption." So the first thing I wanted to say is if you're off-ramping to fiat, you do have to go through some kind of centralized entity, whether that's an exchange or a bank, because they're the ones that are actually storing the dollars. Now, of course, in our DeFi ecosystem, we do have representatives of US dollars in the form of USDC, but the dollars that back them up are still in bank accounts that are held by Circle, and you're still going to have to somehow go through that centralized entity. But Rob, this brings up a good question. Do you think the focus on enterprise adoption curtails us in any way or hinders us with our retail adoption?
I don't think so at all. I think one of the things that the foundation has been very focused on is on the Web3 space, the retail end, and the adoption across the retail end of the spectrum. I spoke to Mei Chan, CEO of Hashpack, specifically about this because they were referenced in the question. Although it's a pretty standard approach across all the Web3 space, and all the chains have wallets that provide the full kind of tokenized capability and user experience. And the on-ramp and off-ramp, the purchasing of tokens is done elsewhere, right? So in certain jurisdictions, wallets need certain licenses to actually do that transaction, and it exposes those businesses to things that they don't necessarily need to be exposed to at this point in their maturity cycle. But May pointed out that Banksa is a very natural partner for off-ramping, which you can do. There are all sorts of integrated mechanisms for bringing fiat cash into the ecosystem and out again, which aren't necessarily through exchanges, although exchanges are a possibility as well. It's a clunky step that the whole of the Web3 space is dealing with, and it will change over time. I have no doubt. May says that they've got some really interesting off-ramping options on their roadmap and that they're working on at the moment. So, typical of all the wallets I speak to, I speak to Sammy at Blade as well, and Jeremy at Walla. They're all kind of dealing with similar challenges, but it's not a Hedera specific challenge. It's Web3, in general, having to work out how best to deal with key management, key recovery, like Lehman's focused on with DREC. And with the on-ramping and off-ramping, which aren't actually the cheapest of options at the moment. if you use a MoonPay or a Banksa, there is a charge. So these are all points of friction that the Web3 space is tackling. But I agree with the question that these are things that need to be dealt with before we get true mass adoption. I don't agree that it's actually a retail versus enterprise question. We will.
Is from Richard Roy 1163, who asks, one of the things I think many people struggle with in relation to Hedera is to understand the scope of the opportunity for the network when the fees are so tiny compared to other platforms. If we were to ask Rob for his opinion on just how big Hedera might get, what would be his opinion? I know it's navel-gazing a little, but I do think it's important to sometimes step back and look at the big picture. Thanks.
There's nothing wrong with navel gazing. In a bear market, there's little else to do other than build and strategize. So, I like to strategize. I'm not sure people struggle with this because, it's Hedera's differentiating factor, right? Low predictable costs, right? We're pegged to fiat and they're super low cost because we scale. And that's the two sides of the equation. Because we know we can scale, we know we can keep the costs low. Now, of course, in this kind of bootstrapping phase, the revenue generated by the transaction fees at such a kind of low level don't cover the costs of running the network, and that's natural, right? So, but they will. And the Treasury Committee, I keep mentioning these governing council committees, but Treasury Committee, or CoinCom as it's referred to, do look at these things. They are tasked, amongst many other things, with ensuring that the fee schedule for all the services that Hedera provides are commensurate with the growth, the forecast growth of the network and how one uses it. And this is hotly debated. Trust me, the fees are hotly debated, and they do change sometimes. So the mechanism is for CoinCom to make recommendations and governing council to vote on it, which has happened, like I said, a couple of times. So I'm reassured that debate has happened, and it's not just finger in the air. That's 1/100 of a cent, and that's 1/10 of a cent, and that's 5 cents. And we'll make it up as we go along. It's actually been modelled, and it, like I said, it couples with the growth. They are tiny fees, but look, we talk about the use cases all the time. Olcott being brought on board for 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent to be tokenized, right? That's a use case, like we said the other week, which has a number of transactions associated with the life cycle of that particular token. That's 500 million times that number. Dropp and micropayments, these are all very tiny payments, but they scale. And once that engages in the US and elsewhere, and the other micropayments use cases and businesses that are now emerging, that will drive revenue as well. Atma is currently obviously the main show in terms of transactional throughput, but as they start bringing tokens on board, and as they continue to scale, then that drives revenue. We talk about Flutterwave, Galaxy, very rich social media environment with lots of interactions. What I'm observing is we're at that stage where most users of the network are single users, right? Apart from the hardcore HBARians who use Hedera for everything. As we get more and more things that we can do, that network effect that we talked about, that utility that is now growing, keeps us within the Hedera ecosystem. We don't just go to Galaxy and then go to X and go to email and then maybe go and buy something somewhere else. We'll do all of those things within Hedera. As I keep saying, everyone will be using Hedera, they just won't know it. And that's true, right? So when this happens, we get the network effect of all of those transaction fees. And that's the point of inflection. That's when we actually then kind of create this parabolic curve of use. And the network fees will follow. So I trust in CoinCom, I trust in the governing council, I trust in Lehman, of course, that these things have been thought through. And we're actually seeing it happen. We talked a lot earlier about the interconnectivity of these of the ecosystem. The services in the back end will be driving network fees as well. It won't just be user and retail or enterprise use of the network. It'll be cross network as well. The bots will be using it, using machine money on stable coins for micropayments to incentivize whole economies. Neuron's drone fleet will be transacting together or via their control towers. Or via their network of IoT sensors. This is a really exciting future, and it scales very, very quickly once it's established. So I'm not worried about tiny fees at all.
All right, fair enough. I think that's a good one to leave it on. I want to thank everybody for asking the questions. If you have any additional questions, drop them down there in the comments. Beside that, Rob, thank you for providing some great answers, and we'll see you next week.
My pleasure, Brandon, as always. I love these questions, and don't make them too technical. Otherwise, I'll have to ask Greg again.
Is that we are so lucky to have somebody like Rob, who's not only a great leader for things like enterprise out there, but is a true HBAR and willing to engage with the community. So happy to have him on every week. All right, so the next thing we're going to get into is Red Swan. They are tokenizing real estate. I caught up with Don and Ed, two executives at that company, to run us through the latest of what they're doing, and they've created their own studio. So let's listen to what they have to say. Ed, Don, welcome. It seems like you gentlemen have been really busy lately.
Yes, we have. Thank you, Brandon. We're really happy to be here. It's been a lot going on in the space, and we're excited to talk about a few of these things that are going on today.
Yeah, great to join you, Brandon.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you both for coming. To start off, Ed, can you explain why you would want to tokenize real estate in the first place?
Well, digital is always better than non-digital. I mean, I think we can all attest to that. Our digital TVs, HD, is much better than our analog TVs. But with regards to tokenized assets, when you digitize an asset, you're actually making it far better in terms of efficiency, transactional efficiency, but also in the case of real estate, liquidity factors. So I think people, given the option to be able to invest in real estate, which is typically an illiquid asset, if you're able to invest in a version of real estate that allows you to have liquidity, whether or not the asset becomes sold, is definitely something that people were going to say, yes, I want that option, as opposed to being trapped for who knows how long it might take to be able to get your money out. So that by itself, I think, is a major winner for the investment industry. But the efficiencies of being able to buy something without going through numerous intermediaries and paying all these additional costs, I think provides a big savings for the investor as well.
The democratization of finance, it makes perfect sense. And of course, Hedera is adding those efficiencies across the board in our space. Now, Don, you are part of the technical team there at Red Swan. In the Hedera ecosystem, we've heard a lot about the stablecoin studio that's been put out by Swirlds Labs, but you've created your own studio. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we've actually had a relationship with Hedera now, I think, for over 5 years, and so it's been a long time coming. We're really excited that we're now working hand in hand with Hedera and Swirlds Labs on some new projects to bring security tokens support to the Hedera platform. So to get that going, the first thing we did is we're working on a new security token standard. It's actually derived from ERC 1400, but then extended specifically to support some of the use cases we think are particularly important. So that's going to be released for the whole Hedera ecosystem. Obviously, having a security standard is one thing, but you actually need to be able to mint those tokens. And so that's where the token studio comes in. So we're also designing a token studio that's going to, again, be ultimately open source to the whole Hedera community, so that anybody that wants to create a security token on the Hedera platform will be able to do so.
That's very exciting stuff, Don. So I'm going to talk about the market itself here. And Ed, I'm going to go to you. So who's on the supply side? Who's currently tokenizing using Red Swan? And how do you see that expanding in the future?
Well, it took a while to kind of educate the market of real estate owners. In our case, we only focus on commercial real estate. But now that the market of real estate is being challenged by high costs of debt, if you can get debt at all, equity and capital are very, very important to sponsors. And so we're seeing more and more sponsors who need capital to recapitalize their stack of equity. so they can pull out some equity rather than sell the property in a time that's not profitable. Like right now is not a good time. It's not appropriate. We're seeing owners are saying, hey, I want to tokenize my asset. I want to tokenize my debt. I'd like to release some of the equity that's trapped in my asset right now. And Red Swan provides a great solution for that, because now if they have a $100 million asset with $50 million worth of debt, that's $50 million of their equity that's trapped in this property. The only option before would be sell the property to release all their equity, but then they don't have that goose that lays the golden eggs anymore. This way, they can recapitalize, say, $40 million of that equity and be able to now still maintain the asset and ride the value back up. So in cases like we're seeing today where cash is very difficult, this is a very, very good tool for sellers to take advantage of.
And now I'd like to ask about the demand side. Who is and will be buying these tokens, and what does that process look like?
Well, who's been buying before has been parties interested in particular types of real estate, buying it in a tokenized fashion. They're thinking about the future of how they can take advantage of having security tokens. But now, as we've seen further adoption in the market, as you mentioned, there's a lot of stable coins coming into the market. There's Visa coming to market accepting cryptocurrency. There's JP Morgan Bank accepting deposits of stable coins. So the ecosystem of stable coins and cryptocurrency is growing. We already surpassed $3 trillion of value, and I think it's going to continue to increase. Well, these are the people who are going to need optionality to buy other types of investments that are already in a digital form. So when you start looking at those who are invested more in cryptocurrencies and stable coins and now want to start looking how they can diversify their investments into other types of alternative investments, these are going to be the buyers who are jumping all over digital real estate, because it gives them the best of all worlds. They get the anchor of very strong and low risk real estate with a decent yield, but they also get that liquidity opportunity. So if they want to get out of it, they can, rather than have to wait a long time for an exit. So I think you're going to find a lot of people who have digital wallets right now, who've been currently holding on to a lot of and hodling a lot of cryptocurrency, are going to start diversifying. We're also seeing institutional companies that we're talking to who are very keen on converting a certain percentage of their assets under management to be digital assets under management. And so whether it be financial instruments or real estate securities, they're very excited about being able to have that on their balance sheet. And then finally, when we've talked to many of the broker dealers in the world and also the IRAs, registered investment advisors, typically real estate is excluded from an IRA's balance sheet as they're managing their customer investments, because it's not a liquid type of investment, so it's off the balance sheet. Now that we are digitizing real estate into shares, it now becomes on the balance sheet. So now IRAs get to put their customers into a real estate asset and be able to charge asset under management fees for that, because they can include it with the other assets that they're managing for their customers. So it's a variety of people who are very interested in this asset class.
Very exciting. Now, I'm curious about the future. I want to put our futurist hats on here real quick. First, we'll start with Don. What are you most excited about for the future when it comes to features for Red Swan?
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be, as Ed already mentioned, the ability to do what we call issuance, which is to issue these digital securities to investors all around the world. I think in terms of democratization of finance, this is probably the biggest, if not one of the biggest opportunities, because now you can have investors all over the world that could never dream of owning top tier real estate, buying into that at levels that they can actually afford. So I think that's also, from an impact perspective, going to make a big difference for a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world that don't usually get those opportunities. Also looking forward beyond that, as Ed also mentioned, there's the liquidity piece. So the end game here is basically a NASDAQ for real estate, where people can trade in and out of these assets in the same way, in the same ease that they trade on E-Trade right now in the stock market. And I think that's going to be a true game changer globally.
And Ed, what are your thoughts on the future? Is there anything else you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
Well, I think that it is the future. It's happening right now. People keep talking about what's going to happen 5 to 10 years from now. It's happening right now. We've tokenized over $5 billion worth of assets. We just had another major assignment in the multi-billion-dollar level, and it's going to continue. Major corporations are calling us. They want to look at their funds. When they were traditionally offering funds that were not in a digital form. They're now looking to digitize those funds because, let's face it, it's much easier for a large institution like BlackRock to not have to pay out redemption to their clients. If you tokenize, they can buy these shares at, like Don said, at a price they can afford. But now the redemption is up to the end user to sell their shares on the open exchange. Just is a major game changer for the entire industry. So let's not talk about the future. Let's talk about right now because it's happening today.
Well, that's absolutely music to our ears. Thank you both for coming on and explaining everything, and good luck.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Brandon.
All right, Zep, I know you have some thoughts on real-world asset tokenization, but before we get into some commentary on what Red Swan said, there's some more information that came out this week that I think we should touch on. We had Duncan from Abrdn talk about what they're doing, the opportunity in front of them, and what they see for the future. Now, he was being interviewed by David Berlin of the Blockchain Journal, and I just wanted to catch some highlights of that, and then we'll go ahead and get into some commentary.
What are the criteria that you used in order to make your selections? Is it performance, reliability? Like what things should other people who are tuned into this webinar be thinking about when they have to make their technology selections?
Anyone that's thinking about, or is building a business and is presumably is building that, because they want that business and they want the business to be around for a long time. And I mentioned that we've been around for a very long time. And we want to continue to be around. So when we go into something new, we use a technology. We want to use a technology that's got longevity, that's got business continuity and sustainability. That's like top level. That's the goal. And then we have to think about the different factors that go into creating that. And that means that it's a technology that's got to be scalable because we want to be successful. And if we're successful and a technology we're using is not scalable, well, either we may not achieve that success or we might have to change technologies. And we don't want to do that. We like long-term partnerships. So it's got to be scalable, high capacity. Speed is important, absolutely. So the number of transactions that can be processed on chain. And the finality element as well. I mean, if the industry really does take off, that overall capacity, transactions, and finality will be very important. You don't want congestion in the network, and then we need a technology that matches our values as well. And I talked about business sustainability, but we also have very strong. Some people say ESG, but sustainability values, climate and social and governance. And that last part is clearly very important to us. It's a technology where there's a strong governance framework that we think aligns with our own approach and the approach of the investors that we're going out to. We're tokenizing existing funds or parts of existing funds, or creating the ability for investors to buy in token form. So parts of ownership of our funds exist on blockchain or on DLT today. But this is a multi-year story, maybe a decade-long story, and things will evolve over time as they do with anything. And we will adapt as we need to. So, we've been working on this for a number of years. So it's not just been, straight away, but now we're at the point of bringing offerings to market in token form. Archac's tokenized investments in our money market funds this year. I guess totaling them up, those funds are probably well over $20 billion, and the amount that you can say that's tokenized will depend on how much we get in inflows. But we've seen the interest has been absolutely massive, and we're not surprised about that because money markets is something that really there's real demand for because of the yield component, and as a safe haven, it's just massive, the opportunity. And I think we talked a little bit about the benefits in equities, but equities is probably the one where stocks are the one where you're not as bothered about it, but there are definitely benefits. The bond market is massive. individual investors do not have access to corporate bonds in their portfolio, individual corporate bonds. We've got to fix that. We've got to give them access. Otherwise, the bond market is not reaching enough of a wide enough audience. All the different private markets, right down to niche alternative investments as well, watches, art, cars. We're already seeing this happen. There's been this whole the institutions are coming kind of thing for a little while, and frustratingly, it's not kind of come to fruition, or there's a lot of real world examples. There's a lot of proof of concept, but not real live examples. But I can tell you that now, more than ever, the kind of the buzz is there. More and more people are talking about this. Every one of our peers is looking at this. Either they're looking at it to learn now, or they're already involved in live projects.
So the opportunity before us for real-world asset tokenization is huge. Now, we've been focused on this for a while, but it just seems like the rest of the crypto space is starting to catch up. What are your general thoughts on what we're seeing in real-world asset tokenization in the crypto sphere?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some sort of clear people at the front of the pack at the moment. I'd put Hedera there, I'd put Avalanche there, I'd put Polygon there, and maybe a couple of others. And they're all, they all understand, not only is it a narrative, but it's a narrative that can really drive real world value, and one that can be sort of delivered upon now. But there is a sort of lag between regulation and this innovation, as there always is, but particularly in the US. And I think where we benefit there is that we have not just some startups, as we do, pursuing this objective or end goal, but we also have some of the biggest and most revered financial institutions or law firms also pursuing that end goal. And when you have a law firm or a team like Abrdn, which have these extensive resources, I suppose, to be able to navigate things like regulation when it comes in, not only the resources financially, but also in terms of manpower and that talent, I think that really does put us in a very promising position. Abrdn, working with Arcax, who are FCA regulated in the UK. We've got DLA Piper, we've got the VARA, the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority in Dubai. We've got a lot of big people with massive reputations who are going regulation first. And I think that's absolutely crucial. When I look at other ecosystems like Avalanche, for example, they've got a lot of money, they've got a lot of capital, they've got good technology, but the money is generally going to these smaller businesses that, as we did mention before, can act nimbly, but do they really have the resources to keep on going, or that kind of pool of talent to really adjust as that regulation comes in? And I think, that's one of the key differentiators for us, is that legacy institution that is behind us. But then, of course, the Hedera native token service, things like that, being able to abstract away from smart contracts and have native tokenization is another massive benefit. But hearing Abrdn talk there, hearing Duncan talk there, knowing that we've got his unwavering support for the Hedera network, knowing that they've been around for a long time, they went through various different chains, including some of the ones I just mentioned before, and they settled on Hedera. I think that is a great bull case in of itself for real-world asset tokenization on Hedera, and hopefully having those flagship projects as they come out will only attract more builders like the Red Swans and so on and so forth. So an exciting time for real-world assets. We've just got to make sure that Hedera has people like Duncan, as he is, out on the front line, making sure that we are positioned to capture that market share, both in the mines, but also physically. So exciting times for real-world assets.
Well said, Zeb. And, Red Swan is tokenizing real estate. We had Duncan talking about tokenizing corporate bonds, talking about stocks and things along those lines. And we even have teams that are tokenizing commodities. Now, this one is a commodity that normally didn't trade because it wasn't fungible, but this team is actually making it fungible, and that is Diamond Standard. Now, we didn't talk to Diamond Standard this time. We've talked to them in the past. This time we talked to Sammy from Blade Wallet, who is integrating and helping Diamond Standard realize their vision. So listen in. Sammy, we've seen Blade have successful Hedera-based collaborations such as Karate Combat. Recently, we heard about a new one. Can you tell us what you're doing with Diamond Standard?
Sure, absolutely. So we have been working very closely with gaming use cases and also consumer apps. And The reason was because we're trying to overcome one of the biggest weaknesses of Web3, which is a good user experience and onboarding friction. And I think to a large extent, if people have experienced the Karate app, we have overcome quite a bit of the friction. The user experience now is actually pretty good. So for the past 3 months, we are now looking at leveraging the strengths of Hedera, specifically our foray into real-world asset tokenization, starting with commodities. So we've been working very closely with the Diamond Standard team. The idea here is to leverage the strengths of Hedera, for example, the KYC flags, the threshold keys, and other features that Hedera has that is very well suited for real-world asset tokenization. Now, for the past 3 months, we've been a little bit quiet because we've been working very hard. For example, by the time this is out, we've gotten our SOC 2 certification. And we've been working on basically buttoning up our compliance and regulatory stature because those are table stakes for real world asset, to be able to handle real world assets. So with Diamond Standard, this is our sort of first tokenized commodity. We believe that tokenized commodities, specifically commodities, as opposed to equities or real estate or maybe even bonds, tokenized commodities is going to be a very, very important asset class in Web3.
All right, so you've been very active, as you mentioned, in consumer engagement, gaming, and NFTs, and now you want to move into the asset tokenization arena. Are you planning on remaining focused on these verticals, or are you going to be focused on other areas as well?
Yeah, so our focus is more and more going to shift towards regulated assets. So, NFTs, at the moment they're unregulated. Some of the kind of tokens that we were involved in the beginning were unregulated. Commodities are less regulated than things like equities and real estate. But again, we do think that one of the big value propositions for Web3 is democratization of finance. And to that end, being able to handle regulated assets is going to be our focus for the next 6 months.
I think considering some of the things that Larry Fink has said, and we're seeing focus with teams like Quarter Homes and Toko and Red Swan, you're certainly focused in the right area. It is, as Larry Fink says, the future of securities markets and financial markets in general. So I think you're on the right track. So Sammy, is there anything else that you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
Yeah, so we've been working on a lot of different things. If you are going to actually store some real world assets like diamonds or nickel or corn, wheat, any of these commodities in your phone, you're going to want something a little bit more robust. Things like, I don't want to give it away, a hardware wallet, for example, that you can fit in your wallet is one of the things that's important. Decentralized key recovery is another thing that's very important. You lose your keys, tough luck is just not going to cut it in the space that we're entering. So we're going to more and more focus on the security aspect, the safety net aspect. Again, a lot of the things that we're working together with some of the other partners in the ecosystem, for example, Swerves Labs. So I hope the community looks forward to a very, very robust offering in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, these are bearer assets after all, and we talk about self-custody all the time, but just like bearer bonds where you actually have the piece of paper, you have to take care of whatever it is, and whatever you can do to provide better tools to be able to self-custody is going to be invaluable. Sammy, thank you so much for swinging by today, and good luck with what you're doing with Diamond Standard.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, it's great to have Sammy there, another OG in the ecosystem who knows how to talk enterprise and how to meet them on their own field. So it's great to have him and the team there alongside Diamond Standard pursuing their vision. So one other piece of news that did come out this week on that sort of more enterprise focus again was that Hedera joined the FINOS Foundation as a gold member. And one of the core tenets of this foundation is to strengthen open source initiatives within the financial services industry. And so already on that foundation, you have the likes of Citibank, you have the likes of JP Morgan, but now through Hedera, we have figures like Abrdn, DBS Bank, FIS, Nomura, Shinhan, and Standard Bank, all further alongside Hedera there as part of this open source initiative. And as we know, open source technology or being open source is one of the core tenets of decentralization by enabling, the developer pool to be opened up, or just developing or enabling open innovation as a whole. And of course, we got in the new chief open source officer, who I believe is pioneering this relationship, just for us to be, shoulder to shoulder with these other financial giants, again, on a foundation like this, where there's open source of, things like code bases, but also just knowledge in general. I think that's a really positive trajectory for us to be there again, shoulder to shoulder, telling them about Hedera, telling them about our own open source initiatives, and seeing if there's any room for collaboration there across that foundation.
Yeah, absolutely, Zeb. And I'm going to take a hard left turn here. We've talked about smaller builders, we've talked about enterprise, we've talked about our council members, but all parts of the ecosystem are important, and that includes content creators. Now here we try to create a home for once you've come into the Hedera ecosystem where you can get all your news information. But another thing that we have to do is bring new people in, and one of the teams that does that better than anybody, I think, is the Genfinity team, and they created tons of good content out at Hello Future Live. This latest one that they posted, you can catch the entire thing on X. They posted it this past week, but it's with Mance Harmon, the man himself. We had Lehman last week, but I caught a few highlights, of course, with their permission, that we can show on here, so check it out.
From the very beginning, we've had as a thesis that real adoption, widespread adoption, would occur when the existing large-scale enterprise solutions, systems that most giant businesses run their businesses on, once the crypto industry starts integrating with those, then we just sort of get woven into the fabric of everything that has been Web 2, and it migrates from Web 2 to Web 3. And what's interesting is that we're beginning to see that sort of thing happen. You can point at some of the financial use cases, and the organizations, the companies that have gone to market with their solutions are now having serious conversations with the financial services I hesitate to call them fintech, because fintech sort of implies startup or small, medium-sized, but these are giant organizations that are providing the equivalent of ERP solutions for the banking and credit union industry. When these systems that are built on top of us, modern Web3 sort of crypto-based solutions or DLT-based solutions, are integrated with those existing systems, then it becomes possible for the existing banks and credit unions out there to flip a switch and turn it on, right? That is the path to mainstream adoption in one category, just the finance piece, right? Just the banking piece. And you see that sort of thing happening, not just in the world of banking, but across the board. The most exciting thing that I've seen, it's not just this year, it actually extends back into maybe sort of the middle of last year or early last year, is that enterprise use and adoption is accelerating, right? And now it's a theme in the industry. It's a theme in the industry. A lot of the big projects, layer ones, are focused on how they get enterprise customers. And this is where we shine, right? We have the council for exactly this reason.
So thank you so much to Genfinity for creating all that great content. And I think they have a lot more to come out from Hello Future Live. And they're just going to continue with their great spaces that they have every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So certainly check them out. The next thing we have is something we covered a while back, and that was the Google Cloud Startup Program. And we had one of our startups that actually joined the program, Sentient. So congratulations to them. They're going to get some support for Google Cloud, and I'm sure make some really good connections there as well. So Zeb, the other thing that came out this week was the Messair Report. They do some really good analysis on Hedera in general. And I know people that watch this, they probably understand a lot of the information that came out from that. But did you have any thoughts on what you saw come out on the Messair Report?
Yeah, so I mean, again, as they mentioned, we saw record growth in transactions. But I think the general sort of takeaway is that we are seeing this growth in a bear market. A lot of other chains have slowed down, both in the partnerships they're developing, but also in the network activity. Whereas it seems that we are, according to the data, at least on a positive trajectory in what is a wider, more tumultuous market. And so they covered things like the Hyundai news, they covered things like the Allcode announcement, they covered some of the massive news that we have also been covering throughout, this buy market ourselves within this channel. But it's good to have that sort of recognition, I think, from one of the core publishers of this data throughout the industry, one of the teams that hosts one of the big conferences like Mainnet 2023, I think it's really important for us to have these relationships and to have a real credible source publishing this data alongside leading chains so that, people can look in and have that credible source of knowledge when they're looking at who they want to sort of follow within this industry, what networks are sort of leading the pack, and so on and so forth. So again, the core premise there, I think, is being that we're seeing growth in a bear market, and hopefully that'll only accelerate as we come out of the bear market.
Yeah, they do some great work over there at Messair. And with that, let's get into some network analysis. So over the past 24 hours, we've had almost 150 million transactions with an average TPS of 1.7 thousand and a max TPS of about 3,900. There was one point last weekend when we actually had over 1 billion transactions in the previous 7-day period, but we have come down a little bit off of that, but we are matching that pace right now. So over the past week, we've had 977 million transactions. Time to consensus is still well under 4 seconds, and we've had about 9,000 accounts created over the past week. Looking at our non-fungible token transaction volume, the meme coin Zero is in the top spot, followed by Wrapped HBAR, Energy Trade Token, Sauce, Dovu, and Karate. Speaking of Karate, I picked up some more on the dip last night. Again, the DGen coming out in me, not financial advice. And following that, we have Jam USDC, Not a Protocol, and HelloSwap to round out the top 10. Moving down to our NFTs, the Hashpack Seasonal Halloween token has had the most transactions, followed by the Zero meme coin themed NFT, Crazy Pixels from Dead Pixels, a few Lithos Gaming Studio NFTs, and Road Code Access. We also have one of the oldest collections putting out a Halloween NFT from HGraph Punks, a Karate Combat themed Karateka NFT, and the Blade Wallet loyalty card making the list as well. All right, Zeb, do you have any thoughts on NFTs this week?
Yeah, I think one of the standouts definitely this week has been the Hashpack Halloween theme. I think they've minted over 15,000 NFTs from within their wallet so that users can now have their own sort of Halloween theme moving up to that, celebration. But I think that, what we really see there is time and time again is Hashpack as, this core sort of community wallet is leading these NFT mints. We saw them when they worked with Vavel Games, how many mints they got there, but they really are, I think, as the core community wallet, they really are well positioned again and again to really enable not only themselves as the wallet through things like the Hashpack Halloween theme, but also the builders within that when they collaborate. They really do have one of the greatest platforms for enabling other builders in the ecosystem. So it's great to see again the success being mirrored, but this time for Hashpack internally with their own NFT there. But alongside Hashpack, we have NFT, who, the data analytics team and one of the Web3 tooling platforms that we have within our ecosystem. They've teamed up with Zero, which is, again, that meme coin, to publish, I think it was about 1 million different pixels. So if you want to get a very low mint, they're working together there, and they've been doing well again there on that front. So those are the two standouts for me this week, I think.
Yeah, NFTs are still struggling throughout the crypto space, but we have so many teams working so hard. I know when the time comes, it's going to pay off. But with that, let's get into some DeFi. Taking a look at DeFi Llama, not including stated liquid staking, the total value locked in the Hedera DeFi ecosystem is just about $30 million. Surprisingly, a little bump from last week. Saucer Swap makes up over 26 million of that, and HelloSwap about 3.6 million. The farming rewards on some of Saucer Swap's popular trading pairs stands at just under 6% on HBAR/HBARX, 23% on HBAR Sauce, 26% on HBAR USDC, and 33% on HBAR Karate. Over on HelloSwap, HBAR/HBARX is at 4%, 80% on HBAR Heli, 19% on HBAR USDC, and 44% on HBAR Karate. Taking a look at the crypto and HBAR markets, with the expectation of a Bitcoin ETF, there's a lot of capital flowing into BTC, which is up 2.8% on the day and a very impressive 10% on the week. HBAR is sitting at 4.7 cents at the time of recording, still above that support range between 4.5 and 4.6 cents that we discussed last week. And 5 cents will still be that next level of resistance. A quick shout out to Paul, who has never had a positive thing to say, but is good for at least a half a dozen comments each week, and we still appreciate him watching. This is a good example of what he usually has to say. HBAR is the weakest coin in the market. While it may feel that way at times, particularly if you aren't used to crypto volatility, it's simply not the case. Here's HBAR's 12-month performance among some of our top competitors we talk about all the time: Avalanche, Algorand, Solana, and Matic. HBAR has held up very well, especially considering the resources it takes to build all the impressive decentralized applications we talk about week in and week out. So try to stay positive, Paul, both for growing networks like Hedera and individuals getting involved in the markets built around them. Time in the market is more important than timing the market. That's all we got. What do you have to close us out, Zep?
So yeah, I think the biggest standout for me again this week was real world asset. Having the team like Red Swan, who've not only already tokenized, I think, $5 billion worth of real world assets, but have also got, other portfolio companies in the works at a much bigger scale. The cool takeaway there is that Red Swan are just getting started, Abrdn are just getting started, DLA Piper are just getting started, and these are three massive contributors to real world assets on Hedera, and they are at their very nascence, which is very exciting for us to be following. But alongside that, we've also heard from some of the smaller startups like Dropp, who are also continuing to pioneer in our space. The ones like Neuron alongside them, these more nimble sort of startups that can move quicker and then hopefully be adopted into the more legacy infrastructure as we move forwards. And then we've also had the likes of Google Cloud supporting our ecosystem as a governing council member with a team like Sentient. So I think that's really is great to see Google Cloud doubling down on our ecosystem, but also, an open call for the startups that we do have to really get involved there, because there is a clear desire for Google Cloud to help our ecosystem. So for any of the pioneers in our ecosystem that are looking for their extra funding, definitely worth checking out that program. So I think across the board, we've had some, great news this week, both from legacy all the way down to startup. And to know that there is that additional support for the startups is definitely something to sort of help bolster us.
Yeah, Zep, I want to echo what you're saying on these smaller teams. We have Neuron trying to get the attention of companies like Amazon over there in the UK. We have Dropp doing a great job doing further integrations with WordPress. I'm not 100% sure, but we might be launching Twiddle next week, and we're really excited about that. Next week, I'm also going to have a Twitter space on our gaming ecosystem on Tuesday. We're still trying to nail down the time, but certainly check that one out. And we need plenty of questions for Rob down there, so make sure you put them down in the comments. And with that, we'll see you next week.
Hello, future. Okay, we're here at Hello Future Live, and we're just asking HBAR variants what they love about Hedera and the Hedera community.
Hedera is just one of those very special communities where everybody seems like they really understand what they're going after. Probably the most researched, well-researched community out there.
Just like the sheer quantity of things that people can do, or the depth that people can go into in their particular projects. I haven't seen it before. So I think that this is a really special spot.
There's a deep respect for each other, but I think that more so there's a contagious factor to it.
The focus not on quick flips, but rather a general understanding of what the bottom line technology can do for others and how to build together instead of against each other.
People genuinely want to see everyone's project succeed, because that's what, to me, what Hedera is all about. So yeah, community.
What do you love about Hedera?
I love the people.
I'm literally gonna tear up, the real connections and the doors that could open because of that.
Some of the most incredible, friendliest people, willing to actually help you out with your projects and actually have that conversation with you.
This has been a family. It's not like just some tech convention. It's not just some crypto. This is really a family here.
I love the ethos. I love the sharing. I love the collaboration rather than competition.
Honestly, I just love how inviting it is. Everyone is so supportive of everything, and I think it's the devotion to the space.
I love the passion that everybody has for not only what they're doing, but what everyone is doing and how everyone can help each other, and that is the feeling that I get from this community for sure.
They're really passionate, like a lot of them, but they're also knowledgeable and welcoming, and I have genuinely never met another community that's as welcoming and as engaging as the Hedera community.
What I love about Hederians, HBARians, is that a lot of creativity, getting together, finding solutions for the challenges we have, but also, thinking more ahead, not short term, long term, making plans and building like real life applications, how we can leverage the Hedera native services.
People that are intelligent, people that want to do good things for the world, and it's just a good recipe for success, and we wind up with good ideas and a lot of drive and passion. Makes for a great community.
Hedera attracts a certain type of person. Mature, not older, but they're people that are mature even if they're 18 years old. They're inquisitive, so they want to dig into things. They want to learn about it. And that is pervasive then throughout the rest of the ecosystem.
I love the fact that this actually feels like a community, right? Because you have people cheering each other on. Hedera is where I have met a lot of builders. Here it's all about let's build something together and let's see what can we build that empowers the entire community.